Today is a day of a tale of tales that the world know very well. But to them that the story is told about forever remains a tale. But on this joyous day of days, what was lost have now been found. Them who helped to uncover the truth will live in the world renowned. Return of the King, return of the King, make way, make way, make way. Return of the King, return of the King, forever where he may reign. Time waits for no one, 'cause everyone's subject to time. From tales of God to tales of men, therein your answer will lie. Return to the King, return to the King, make way, make way, make way. Return to the King, return to the King, forever where he may reign. Greetings, greetings, greetings. It is I, your king, King Clifford Jefferson, descendant of Godfrey, the fifth Count of Anjou, son of Folk, the rulers of Jerusalem. I am the reincarnation of who, as you know, as Jesus Christ, which we know as King Edgar the Peaceful. I'm here with my queen, Sister Galveston from the House of Galveston, along with our family, our officers, our staff, our members, our family. We come here and greet you on the principles of love, truth, peace, and justice. That's a saying that's universal throughout all the societies, no matter how you say it. But the purpose of those principles is for to coexist with each other. Apparently, that's not happening. So our job is to make sure that that's done. So we welcome you here today into the English Church of England, the reincarnation of the Westminster Church that existed from time immemorial, created by our King Edgar the Peaceful. Along with me, as I said, I have my staff, Archbishop Mount from the House of Belmont, CA, Court of Judah, Brother Burgess from the House of Burgess, as well as all the other officers that are attending here today. We're going to greet you. I'm going to digress and let my queen say a couple of words, and we'll pass the torch to Archbishop Belmont, and then he can pass it therefore. I digress. Queen?
Beautifully spoken from the King. I'm Lisa Jordan Goodwin from the House of Godwinson. Hope everyone is blessed today. I want to give honors to Archbishop from the King's Bench and all of our members here today. We are in a state of dire need.
That's your favorite word.
We got to start teaching our babies while they're young their correct history. With the way things are going nowadays, we don't have a lot of time to get this thing right. I can't stress this importance enough. To all our members who are listening, please pay attention, take heed. We can't count on someone else to give us our history. We have to go and do the research and find out for ourselves. Me and the King, as you know, live here in Perth Amboy, New Jersey, which we had no idea the extent of history that is coined in this city that we live in domicile. Like I said, there's a lot of rich history here, and I'm looking forward to the meeting today, and looking forward to the enlightenment in the state and city that we live in. And with that, I digress.
Well said, Queen. Well said, Queen. Archbishop Belmont.
Greetings, everyone. First and foremost, give honor, blessings to our King Clifford Jefferson as well as Queen Godwinson. Without their due diligence and doing the work that they're doing in their position as the head of our church as well as our kingdom or empire, it gives us the pleasure to be able to come amongst you as brothers and sisters to be able to take in what it is that they have been learning and building for us to restore harmony and balance within the kingdom again. Today is October 9th, 2972, Berber calendar, which is 2022, the Gregorian calendar. This is a fall season, which is another perfect time to be able to wrap up this year. It's fall normally when things fall into action. Winter time, that's when things go to rest. For the springtime, for things to come in, new fruitings. But like I said, in our case, which we're going to be learning today, is a great lesson that's going to be able to help kick off that that new cycle that we're starting to come into. And like the king said, it's always important to you to take this in, take it serious, and for those who make it applicable, for you to actually use it accordingly. And today many brothers and sisters keep saying that they have the remedy for freedom, but we know if you're not part of the church, that's just not the case. So with that being said, I digress, and I leave the rest of the introduction to the rest of the brothers and sisters here on the panel.
We're gonna put today's lesson for the simple fact of the lengthy lesson I have today, and for the video we're gonna move. We're gonna pass on today. So we know each one of you from each and every one of your respective house has good vibes and good things to say. We're going to take it in spirit just for the sake of the lesson today. I hope everyone is okay with that. You're welcome to speak now if you got something to say. I don't want to stop you, but we got a very good lesson today, and I don't want to prolong. So if everybody's cool with that, I'll move forward. Okay, let's move forward. Greetings, everyone. Once again, I am your king, reincarnation of Godfrey, the fifth caliban Jew. It's just wonderful to be here today. Like I said, through the opening of this podcast, we're in the matrix. We are in reality, but we have no true participation in that reality, and the reason why that is because we don't have no estate. The word estate, standing, and status is all the same word. You have no reality because you're not part of the estate. And not to be part of the estate, which means you have no standing in law. Everybody needs to understand that. This is what we're here to fix today. To give you standing in law, so that you can correct your status, so that you can regain your estate, your real estate. Real estate means land, buildings, and fixtures. The only way to have that is by having an absolute title. There's two types of titles: presumptive title and conclusive. A presumptive title and conclusive title. Our presumptive title is the title of ownership or a title to property, which means nothing more than a legal interest in property. Our concrete title is a lolio title, which means that you don't have to prove you own it, so you don't need to be walking around with a deed in your pocket. Does that make sense to everybody? Crystal. Every time somebody went up to you own this, where your proof? What you mean proof? What you mean proof? How do you got proof you own it? Nobody has proof to how they own this land. The only way you can own land or have proof that you own it is to have no other person to supersede it, precede you. And for that, you have to go back to the history of this country, its laws, and its people. Because we're not on the continent of Africa, Europe, or Asia. We're on the continent of what we call now America. Before that, it was called what we call the Jeffersonian era. That began in 1790 was Thomas Jefferson. Before that, you had what we call the Federalist Party, which goes into your founding fathers. Before that, you had what they call the colonists. These were the colonies who came over here. And they were all granted rights to come here by way of proprietors. Proprietors are called Lord Proprietors, subject to what we call the Westminster system. It didn't say the East Minister system. It said the West Minister system. Okay, my time is 1:09. That's my time to stop. So I got to move forward. Got to move fast. Everyone who I call on to read, try to read swiftly, clearly, and hopefully, please pay attention to today's lesson because it's paramount. Okay, without further ado, let's get started. Let's see. Hopefully, my screen won't give me any problems. Let's see. Everybody see this?
Not yet.
Yeah, now.
I see it.
Okay. This is called St. Peter's Episcopal Church in Perth, Amboy. It's sitting on the hill. Now, remember, we know who St. Peter's was. He was the rock that Jesus said he will build his church on. We know based off the two cases, the town of Paulette versus Daniel Clark, as well as the propagation of the gospel, said that the Episcopalian Church never fit the description of those who were allowed to have the glebe or the earth or the soil based off the grants that was given by the grantor, which was the king at that time. All right, so this is called St. Peter's Episcopal Church. Countess Walker, would you read?
Yes. St. Peter's Episcopal Church, New Jersey's oldest Episcopal parish. St. Peter's was established in Perth, Amboy in 1698. Construction of the first church here was begun in 1719, and the churchyard went into use in 1722. The original building, compact and narrow, was a prominent steeple at its entrance, was replaced by the present structure, designed by brick manufacturer and architect Alfred Hall in 1852. A series of fine English stained glass windows added to the early 1900s depict themes of the Bible and colonial.
Sorry. Okay, right there, go ahead.
A series of fine English stained glass windows dated to the early 1900s depict themes of the Bible and of colonial times. The elegant Gothic revival architecture of the main building, along with its more modern day entrance and steeple, keep guard over the remains of some of the most well-known citizens of Perth Amboy's history, as well as some of those whose names are long gone. Rising high above the waterfront berth, the church is visible from Raritan Bay. Indeed, even from the shore of the Staten Island. In the churchyard vaults house such notables as Thomas Gordon, an original settler from Scotland, William Dunlap, known as the father of American drama, and Thomas Mundy Peterson, the first African-American to vote next to the everyday citizen who lived, worked, and died here, as well as the bodies of them deemed too lowly at the time to even be signified by a headstone. All are known now equally respected.
Okay, so this is St. Peter's Episcopalian Church. Let's go to it and get a modern day understanding. So it says St. Peter's Episcopal Church is a historic church at Rector and Gordon Street in Perth, Amboy, Middlesex County, New Jersey. All right, county is Middlesex, the town is Perth Amboy. It is the oldest Episcopal parish in New Jersey and contains the oldest extant gravestone in New Jersey, as he just said. Let's move down to history. The congregation was organized in 1680 with 12 churches of England communicants designated themselves the Congregation of St. Peter's Episcopal Church. A communicant is an officer of the church. The root word of communicant is the word commune. Everybody heard of that word commune? When you take communion? So this is what they do. It's an oath. It's part of the ceremony for you to be a part or a head of a parish. And it's named after Rector Street. The rector of this parish was named as Thomas Gordon. Let's get an understanding who this guy was real quick.
Wow.
Thomas Gordon. Thomas Gordon, a lawyer. Thomas Burnett Gordon was a Scottish immigrant to the 13th colony who became Chief Justice of New Jersey Supreme Court and New Jersey Attorney General for the province of New Jersey. Now remember, the Attorney General is called Province Patriarch. He's the father of the nation. You got it for the United States and you got it for the states. You don't have it for the colonies, nor do you, you don't have it for the counties, nor do you have it for the municipalities, because they are incorporated into the state, which at one time were called colonies. We're not coming at this angle from a state, because the state changed from colony September 20th, 1777, when they amended New Jersey State Constitution, which was actually created July 2nd, 1776. So Thomas Burnett was a lawyer and an attorney general. Just gonna break down his life. You know, he's from Scotland. He's descended from Robert III, King of Scotland. So this is where he claims his descent down. This is the House of Stuarts. He said Thomas immigrated to America in 1684, settling in the province of East New Jersey. He was a graduate of King's College in Cambridge.
I just saw that plane from New Jersey.
Yes, Thomas, yeah. Thomas purchased, my wife grew up in Plainfield, New Jersey. So Thomas purchased several hundred acres bounded by Cedar Brook and what is today Plainfield, New Jersey. He erected a Wickman property in the late 17th century. The Gregorian family properties of Perth, Amboy, New Jersey, called New Aberdeen in the Jersey colony. So that means that this property of the Gordon family, a lawyer, took his root in Perth Amboy when it was a colony. Everybody follow?
Follow.
Okay, let's go back. So it said the congregation was organized in 1680 when 12 Church of England communicants. These were rectors. These are members who had the parishes, because the parishes are now called counties. They were called shires at one particular time. It said they erected churches using the foundation of an abandoned courthouse. So prior to it becoming an Episcopal church, it was a courthouse. Remember, there was no such thing as separation of church and state. There was just a church state, which was the Church of England. All right. It said the site is not that far from the current church. In 1706, Queen Anne of Great Britain presented the parish with a set of communion silver that is still extant. They received the royal charter in 1718 from King George I of Great Britain. All right. In 1770, Governor William Franklin was a vestryman in the congregation. All right. We all talking about this church. During the American Revolution, colonial soldiers built a redoubt behind the church to defend towns against attack from the British and Loyalist troops across the Arthur Hill and Staten Island. That's right in back of us. The first Black man to vote in America was Thomas Mooney Peterson, was a member of the church and was buried in the church graveyard, St. Peter's Episcopal Church. He voted in Perth Amboy, New Jersey, mayoral election on March 31st, 1870. That was one day after the adoption of the 15th Amendment of the United States Constitution, when everybody got the chance to vote. Prior to slavery, we didn't have a chance to vote. Everybody caught up?
Follow.
Thomas Mooney. Let's get a good idea who this guy was. Thomas Mooney. Thomas Mooney Peterson of Perth, Amboy, New Jersey, has been claimed to be the first African-American to vote in the election under the just enacted provisions of the 15th Amendment to the United States Constitution. His vote was cast on March 31st, 1870. The amendment had been ratified almost 2 months earlier on February 3rd, but was only officially certified by Secretary of State Hamilton Fish. Going on a little further. Okay, well, you know he's from Perth Amboy. He had an estate as well, all right? But because of the status, he didn't have a right to real estate. He just had a right to a legal interest in ownership of property of an estate that he had to pay taxes on, which everybody got to pay taxes on because you don't own it. All right, so we know about Thomas Gordon. We know about, Gordon, and we know about the other guy. What was his name? Thomas Gordon and they got the same name. Thomas Gordon and Thomas Peterson. Thomas Jefferson. Very important. All right, let's see. Another person, Jacob Van Winkle. Jacob Van Winkle sat in his Middlesex County home in the spring of 1880 with money on his mind. You heard that? Mind on the money and money on my mind. He realized slaves in New Jersey sold at far below the price of Mississippi and Louisiana plantation owners, paid for similar chattel from the Upper South. With this knowledge, Van Winkle sought to sell dozens of cheap New Jersey-born slaves to the New Orleans market. Now, this is up north. He going way down to Louisiana and Mississippi. Transporting slaves. She said Van Winkle sought to sell dozens of cheap New Jersey-born slaves to New Orleans market. As the ringleader of the largest slave trading organization in the Garden State, he helped undermine the promise of abolition, which had begun in New Jersey in 1804. In February 1804, New Jersey became the last northern state to begin the process of dismantling its slave system, which it passed an act for the gradual abolition of slavery. This was in what we call the City Hall. What's it called? City Hall, the white building.
City Hall.
City Hall. First City Hall in Perth Amboy. I said in February 1804, New Jersey became the last northern state to begin the process of dismantling its slave system when it passed an act at the gradual abolition of slavery. The law declared children born to slave mothers after July 4th, 1804 should be free, but should remain the service of the owner of his or her mother, and should continue in such service if a male until the age of 25 years, and if a female up to the age of 21 years. The abolition laws essentially declared a freedom of the womb as it freed all children born to the slaves, but requires them to serve their mother's master until they reach the statutory age. This is under what we call partus. How you say Archbishop? Say it the right way.
Partus equator urantrum.
Okay, status of the mother. Everybody think about that. You got a birth certificate, you're going by the status of the mother. Let's check this out. Everybody, please pay attention. All those who are on these platforms and don't get these type of answers to your questions. Sister Walker, you continue.
And it.
Hold on, let me share. Before we do that, let's go here first. Can you read that?
Yes.
Okay,
Oldest corporation in U.S. history after 314 years.
Hold on. I'm sorry. No, that's the other one. Hold on.
New share. There you go.
Okay, everybody see that?
Okay, yes. Enslavement and transatlantic human trade. Near the site, enslaved African Americans disembarked at Perth Amboy, the principal port in eastern New Jersey. During colonial times, numerous slave ships, such as the Catherine, William, Africa, and Sally were present in the Ramerton Bay,
Barrington Bay.
Mhm.
sending their captives upon the city pier, now the present day site of the historic ferry slip. In one day alone, the Catherine arrived with 240 enslaved people, leaving 17 dead at sea and depositing 130 survivors in Perth, Amboy. In Africa, traders captured approximately 240 million children, women, and men, half of whom died at the march of coastal prisons or within the prisons awaiting transport across the Atlantic.
Stop.
And
That's fine. That's fine. That's all we need to know. I don't even want to go no back to that history. But they're saying that the transenslavement of the transatlantic human trade started here in Perth, Amboy. That's what they just said. I didn't say that. They said it. All right. Let's qualify that. You see that?
Not yet.
1 second. Nothing yet?
Yeah, now we can see it, the middle passage.
Yes. Okay. Continue to read, Sister Countess Walker.
middle passage. This article is about the slave trade route. For other uses, see middle passage. The middle passage was the stage of the Atlantic slave trade in which millions of enslaved Africans were transported to the Americas as part of the triangular slave trade. Ships departed Europe for African markets with manufactured goods. First, the side of the triangle, which were then traded for slaves with rulers of African slaves, states, and other African slave traders. Slave ships, also known as Guinea men, transported the slaves across the Atlantic, second side of the triangle. The proceeds from selling slaves were then used to buy products such as hides, tobacco, sugar, rum, and raw materials, which would be transported back to Northern Europe, third side of the triangle, to complete the triangle.
You hear that? That's it. So they're saying there was a triangle. Triangle had three sides. First stop was Europe, right? They said Europe. Pay very close attention to the language they use. Then they said to Africa. Then they said back to North America, because that's where the produce was in North America. Then back over here. That's only dealing with the history of the 16th century. Everybody understand? Before you had America, the Jeffersonian, the Republican Party, the Federalists, the colonies, as well as the monarch system, you had what they call France, New France, and New Spain. You had New France and New Spain. Charles V and Francis I. They all descended from the Frankish dynasty. And they all descended, and the Spanish descended from the Castilian dynasty or houses. They all go back to Henry II and Eleanor Aquitaine. That's the 12th century, y'all. New Spain and New France only goes back to the 15th century, 1521 and 1523. Dealing with the western side of what we call North America. But yet they're talking about the transatlantic slave trade or the triangle slave trade, transporting slaves from Africa. They started in England They didn't start in America, what they call now. They started in England to Africa, back to what they call America today. That makes sense to everybody?
Wow.
Follow.
Any questions? No questions?
Point of interest, King.
Go ahead.
Which were the monarchs, the ruling monarchs of New France and New Spain in 1520?
Charles V and Francis I.
You said the pay attention to the verbiage, how it says that the ships
Europe. They said Europe. They said first to Europe.
for Africa.
They didn't say England. They didn't say Great Britain. You don't know where they're pointing to over here, do you?
Mm.
It's not specific, but they were specific here. This is the first side of the triangle. It says Europe. It says ships depart Europe for Africa markets with manufactured goods. First side of the triangle. That's from here to there. Which were then traded for slaves with rulers of African states and other African slave traders. Slave ships, also known as guinea men, transported slaves across the Atlantic second side of the triangle. So that means from here to here, and then when they got those slaves, they transport them to here. That's the third side.
So,
It said, what? Go ahead.
so what's the pivotal point that we're trying to make from this triangle right here?
I'm about to get to it. I just want to make sure that you're on the path with me. All right. So it's called the triangular slave trade, right? Which consists of, don't that look like that thing be on Dr. Spock's
Sure.
Star Trek?
It is.
Huh?
All right. Why do I say that? Because we know what the symbol of Earth is, right?
Yep. It's crossing a circle.
As above, so below.
Below.
Can everybody see that? Let me share. Hold on. Everybody see that?
Scroll down a little bit.
Y'all see that?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. A variety of symbols of iconographic conventions are used to represent the earth, glebe, soil, rocks, dirt, minerals, all the natural resources. Because water is a natural resource, but it doesn't have the composition of earth. We can all agree.
Great.
Follow.
So only two things in lieu of the story we can acquire. That somebody's telling the story, right? I'm
Follow.
about to bring the abstract to the concrete, so you better strap on your spaceships. We're about to be in the spaceship. And we're looking at the symbol for earth, right? And we know earth and water is two different things. Water is governed by admiralty maritime law, and earth is governed by the law of the land,
Follow.
right?
Follow.
Now, for all those who are inquiring about the laws of admiralty, they were created by Eleanor of Aquitaine, who was married to Henry II, King of England, son of Godfrey, the fifth Count of Anjou. For all those who think they know about admiralty maritime law, you might know about it, but do you know the origin where it comes from? It comes from England. Eleanor of Aquitaine. So the symbol of the earth is a convention used to represent earth. Remember, we lords, we gods, not abstract, but concrete. Our mind's not even attached to our body. You're living in what they call what they call the spacesuit or avatar, using what we call autobiological memory, autobiological memory or engrams, or what we call heat arthroscopy, or what we call an out-of-body experience. When you sit here at the English Third Temple Church of England, you're having an out-of-body experiment. Because you're traveling back through time. Remember, reality. You're in the reality, but you're not part of the reality because you never designed to be a part of that reality. You have to go back to your reality, where your estate came from, where you come from on this earth. Because you know you came out of water, now you're here on earth. So it said a variety of symbols of iconic conventions are used to represent earth, whether it's in the sense of a planet, earth, or the inhabited world, or the classic elements. Everybody sees symbols here.
Mhm.
You got the circle with the cross in it. You got the circle with the cross on top. As above, so below. So in the circle is hell. On top of it is in heaven. In the belly of the beast, this represents Jesus coming, represents the belly of the beast. And to the belly of the earth. We're in the belly of the earth now. Jesus came down into the belly of the beast. How we know that? The symbol, globus crucica. All the monarchs are carrying this globus crucica. Globus crucica for cross-bearing orb, also known as the orb-bearing cross, is an orb surmounted by a cross. It has been a Christian symbol of authority since the Middle Ages, used on coins, iconography, and with a scepter as a royal regalia. Why do I say that? Because we're looking at the world in regards to our state. We're not confined to it. Why? Because we're the ones created it. How we know we created it? Because it said that we became enslaved through the Middle Passage when it was started by the Triangle Square slave trade. We started from Europe, Africa to America, from Europe, Africa to America, and back to Europe. It didn't say England. It didn't say Great Britain. It specifically said Europe. Europe is its own continent that's connected to Africa as well as Asia. Am I correct, y'all?
Correct.
Let's get an aerial view as lords. Anglosphere. Everybody see that?
Yes.
You see all the highlighted areas. The Anglosphere. Sphere means circle. They thought the earth was flat at one time. Let's go back to iconograph. Where's we at? Let's go here first. New World. Everybody see this?
Yes.
New World is a term often used for the majority of Earth's Western Hemisphere, specifically called the Americas. The term gained promises in the early 16th century during the Europe Age of Discovery. Europe Age of Discovery. Europe Age of Discovery. Shortly after the Italian explorer American Vespucius concluded that America represented a new continent and subsequently published his findings in a pamphlet he titled Mundus Novus. So let's go back here. Anglosphere. Now, the only way you can see this view is in the air, to have a view of all three continents at the same time. Or four continents, they say the four continents. Because America was last. First you had India, Africa, and Europe. Now you got America, the West, right? Now, but yet it says the Anglosphere is a group of English-speaking nations that share historical culture with England. which today maintains close political, diplomatic, and military cooperations. While the nations include in different sources vary, the English way is usually not considered to include all countries where English is the official language, so it is not synonymous with Anglophone, though the nations that are commonly included were all once part of the British Empire. Everybody see that?
Follow.
Now we're talking about spear. The globe is spear. Globe is spear means a picture of the globe, right? So that brings us here. Your spear. Look at the map. Is any of this considered the Eurosphere? Because all the Eurosphere is lit up in colors.
Mhm.
Everybody see that?
Yes.
Dark blue, European. Light blue, carrying a largest agenda. Turquoise, European neighborhoods. Brown, ACP country, whatever that stands for. So this is called the Eurosphere. You have the Anglosphere and the Eurosphere. Let's go back to, I gotta move fast. Back to the symbol of the world. A variety of symbols of iconography convention are used to represent Earth, whether in the sense of a planet Earth or the inhabited world or as classical elements. A circle represents the round world, where the rivers of the Garden of Eden separate the four corners of the world or rotate, represent the four corners of the, hold on, sorry. It says, where am I at? A circle represents the round world with the rivers of Garden of Eden separating the four corners of the world, or rotate 45 degrees to suggest a four continents remains a common pictograph convention to express the notion of worldwide. The current astronomical symbol for the planet is a circle with an intersecting cross circle. Everybody follow? So you're talking about the four continents, but yet they didn't discover the new world until the 16th century. But yet they know about all four continents because they got the globus crucifer. How you know it? They all carry it. It's right there. They all carry it. So my question, who the hell told them that? About the four corners of the world? If you just now trying to discover the new world. But you don't even know how this got here, the old world. How we know that? Let's go here. Dyson spear. Everybody heard of that? Anybody ever heard of Dyson spear?
No. No.
Greetings, Sister Harris on the House of Harris.
Greetings, greetings.
Oh, we got a full house today. Greetings, Brother Middleton. Anybody heard of the movie called, what time we got? 1:42. I gotta move quick. Anybody heard the Moonfall?
Yes.
Watch that movie.
We watched.
Watch the movie. A Dyson spear is a hypothetical megastructure that completely encompasses a star. Encompasses a star and captures a large percentage of its solar power output. We are etheric beings. How I'm gonna prove it? The first contemporary description of the structure was by Olaf Stapleton and his science fiction novel Star Maker. They even had an episode on Star Trek called The Dyson Spear. Talking about the same thing that's in the movie Moonfall. This goes to the story dealing with Apollo crashing to the and going to the moon. They talk about it in the movie Transformers, the dark side of the moon. It talks about Mercuricium. Mercuricium is the name of a sea on the moon. All right. Now this is a description by a guy named Olaf Stapleton called the novel called Star Maker. Now let's look at this Star Maker. I gotta move fast, y'all. Star Maker is a science fiction novel by a British writer, Olaf Stapledon, published in 1937. The book describes the history of life in the universe, dwarfing the scales Stapledon's previous book, Last and First Men. Let's go to it. Everybody listen. The plot, a human narrator from England. Hold on. This is a narrator from England is transported out of his body via unexplained means. He realizes he is able to explore space and other planets. After exploring a civilization on another planet in this galaxy, at a level developed similar to our own that exists millions of years ago, thousands of light years from Earth, the other Earth. In some detail, his mind merges with that of one of its inhabitants, and as they travel together, they are joined by still more minds of group minds. This snowballing process is paralleled by the expansion of the book scale, describing more and more planets and less detail. This is what's happening now. You're being taught by a narrator from England by way of being transported out of his body. What do we mean by transporting out of his body? Let's get another idea about that. I gotta move quick. Out-of-body experience, or sometimes UBI, is a phenomenon in which a person perceives the world from a location outside their physical body. OBI is a form of arthroscopy, literally seeing self. Although this term is more commonly used to refer to the pathological condition of seeing a second self or a doppelganger. That's another word for it. But it's called arthroscopy, an out-of-body experience. We call it the engrams or autobiological memory, because when you're dreaming, you have no control of the dream. But when you daydream, you have control of the dream. Everybody, that makes sense to everybody?
Follow.
Follow.
What we're doing right now is daydreaming about events of our ancestors through the ethereal realm by having an out-of-body experiment. It's called arthroscopy. What is arthroscopy? Arthroscopy is experience in which the individual perceives the surrounding environment from a different perspective, from a position outside of their own body. Arthroscopy comes from the ancient Greek self and watcher. So this is what we're doing. We're living in a reality. Why? Because we were put in this reality, but it's not our reality. Because if it was our reality, then in reality, we would be able to participate freely in our reality without any encumbrances.
Mm-hmm.
Every time we try to participate in reality, we get drawbacks. You can't do this. You can't do that. You can't do this. You can't do that. Why can't I? I'm a part of this reality. Why? Because you ain't real. They didn't create you to be real in their reality. Because their reality is based off our real estate. In order to take our reality from us, they have to take our real estate from us. And the only way they did that is take our legal standing.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody follow?
Follow.
Okay, I gotta keep moving. Now we got celestial spirit. Anybody heard of that?
Mm-hmm.
Celestial spirit. It's an astronomy and navigation. The celestial spirit is an abstract spirit that had, now remember, abstract spirit. Now, how in the hell is these people carrying that globus crucica, which is representation as above, because you're talking about the four corners of the world. North America, South, you got Europe, Asia, Africa, and now America. That's four corners. But you can't see all four corners of the world if you're on Earth, can you? You don't get to see four corners of the earth if you're outside of the earth, can you? So somebody must be telling our story from outside of this earth, from a celestial spirit. And we know that because of what we just read based off the Star Maker book in regards to somebody narrating the story from England about somebody, a Dissolution spirit, which is a maker structure that's hollow. That's our moon. Our moon is the maker structure. It's hollow. It's called art. Let me give you a scale, show you. Everybody see that? When you watch the movie Thor, they all talking about this giant maker structure. When you watch the movie Moonfall, it's going to tell you about this giant maker structure, which is called a satellite. What does satellite do? Send information, right? If it sends information to who? Just like trees, water, everything get information to tell them or give them instructions. If an animal comes into being and knows what to do from birth, why don't we have the same type of understanding about our forefathers when we come into birth? Because somebody put a glitch in our system.
Some type of interference.
Some type of interference. All right, let me move quickly. All right, let's go here. Sister, who was just reading? Countess Walker?
Yes.
Yes.
Countess Allen, you start from here. Y'all gotta read fast. You only got 10 minutes.
Perth, Amboy, New Jersey. Before New Jersey existed, before Peter was great or Washington was born, before steam engines or peppermint or Robinson Crusoe, before any of these things, the proprietors ruled. There were 12 men, most of them from London. Most would never set foot in the New World. But they owned half of what would become New Jersey, 1.1 million acres of verdant field and forest and pristine shoreline. All but a smattering of those lands were sold off long ago, but their corporation survived. Its shares handed down from generation to generation. It is now 314 years old, the oldest continuously operated corporation in the United States. But not for long. A court will soon dissolve the East Jersey Board of Proprietors, and a vestige of colonial America will be gone forever. It was very traumatic for a number of members. It was all done with a heavy heart, says Frederick A. Gherkin, the board's registrar. The board has fallen victim to a very modern malady. Its shareholders, most of them elderly, are afraid they may face legal liability for environmental and other problems on lands the board owns. The age of the board members, it is in itself a problem. For
Oh,
hundreds.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
Right here.
The age of the board members in itself is a problem. For hundreds of years, shares were kept within families, but sadly, in the 1990s, the allure of being part of history is not what it once was. The grandchildren who might have become involved, well, really, it doesn't mean anything to them, Gherkin said. The breakup wasn't easy. The board is not chartered by the state. It predates the state, and it took a while to determine that a court could terminate the corporation. The court should act in a few months.
Stop. Well, as you can see, they are nothing more than a big corporation, the board of proprietors. If they don't exist, then the land automatically becomes what? The crown. All right, where we at? Lower proprietor. Okay, lower proprietor. A lower proprietor is a person granted a royal charter for the establishment and government of an English colony. In the 17th century, the plural of the term is lord proprietors or lord proprietary. So we can see the proprietors was nothing more than those giving grants to come on English soil. When you say English colonies, they're not talking about colonies are English. They're only saying that the colonies who are over here are on English land, because it's part of the Anglosphere. It's not part of the Eurosphere, it's part of the Anglosphere. The Eurosphere was established when they started transporting slaves from Africa, but we were already here. We're just getting our story from the 16th century, but leaving out that which existed before the 16th century when you go into the history of New Spain and New France. All of a sudden now you got the Olmecs and the Mexicans and everybody else, the Native Americans. That's false. It never existed. Never existed. You were warring with the Roman Catholic Church way before that. We prove that because you have to go into the history governing this land, which goes back to the Dutch, Spain, France, and you go right back into because the first rulers of France, New Spain, and New France was Charles V and Francis I, and they all descended from the Capitan or Valios, which were Frankish, Carolingian, and Merovingian clans. They all descended from what we call the Clovis culture, from Clovis I. We spoke about that in previous lectures. We're not even going to go through that. And we know the first culture to be established here in North America is called the Clovis culture. They stole our story and created a new fabrication of our story. They're going to tell you themselves. Let me come to my closing for this part of the argument. Let's go back to this church. Oh, Perth, Amboy, where is it at? Okay, here we go. Perth, Amboy, once again. Perth, Amboy is associated with Benjamin Franklin, and Benjamin Franklin was buried in this what we call graveyard. St. Peter's Church, which held its first service in 1685 and received a royal charter in 1718, had been recognized as its first Episcopal congregation in the state. Now, me and the Queen went by there yesterday, and I walked around the church 2 times. When I walked outside the church, there's another food pantry across the street for the church. And I guess one of the ministers walked out. I guess there were nuns. It was 3 people, 3 Europeans. So I walked across the street and said, "My speak to the rector," and they whoever he was, he had that the minister thing they have on. He said, "Well, right now they're in between. They don't have one." I said, "Well, do you all recognize how old this church is?" And the guy said, "Yeah, 1683." I said, "Yeah." I said, "Are you aware?" And then one of the ladies said, "Oh, are you aware of the map?" Or she said the platform. The platform where we just read about the slave trade on the pier. I said, "Yes, I'm aware of that as well." So she let me know that she knew more about our history than we knew ourselves relative to slave history, because they're still functioning in these parishes as rectors. She knew the history about Perth Amboy, and I'm asking questions about it. I walked around the churchyard 3 times. Now watch what they say about this church. They're going to show you in this video a picture of this church. Is on the map in 1683. And with that, I digress. Archbishop, let's do justice.
All right. Everyone hear it?
Not yet.
Okay. Can you hear it?
Not yet.
Oh, you might have to turn your audio up on your computers.
Okay.
Can everyone else hear it?
Yes.
Okay.
Archbishop,
Yes, King.
could you make it widescreen? Yeah.
And I'm gonna try to use the option.
To many people, the subject of American slavery evokes thoughts of antebellum Southern plantations.
You got to start from the beginning,
However,
Archbishop.
17
Yeah. That ain't all proof. This historic engraving painted to validate this story. So this is not made up. They gonna take it themselves.
To many people, the subject of American slavery evokes thoughts of antebellum Southern plantations. However, throughout the 17th, 18th, and 19th centuries, slavery remains widespread throughout the North. Among the earliest slaves are Native Americans, who are captured in various conflicts and wars.
That's a lie.
In the region that would become New Jersey, the Native Americans are called the Lenape.
That's a lie.
Group, along with other Indian tribes, develop a reputation for being unruly slaves. As a result, some are shipped out to large plantations in the West Indies.
That's a lie.
Lenape simply die off, as they have no immunity to European diseases. Colonists unwittingly exposed both free and enslaved Indians to smallpox, measles, scarlet fever, cholera, and the plague, which caused entire tribes to vanish.
Pause it, Archbishop.
As a result of all this,
All y'all viewing this podcast, y'all better get away from that Native American story and all that mess. That's a lie. I just showed you it's a lie because you got New France and New Spain that goes back to these surnames that you have today. And Native Americans don't have these names. So whether you were a slave with these names, the names still belong to you prior to you being a slave. Continue. I ain't saying nothing else.
Lenape slavery is not considered practical. New Jersey, along with Pennsylvania and New York, is part of the Dutch colony called New Netherland. The Dutch make Manhattan their main base of operation. During 1626, the first enslaved Africans arrive in New Netherland to work for the Dutch West India Company. The Dutch West India Company is anxious to develop its resources in their colony and ships African slaves to meet the demand for hard labor, with some slaves being introduced into New Jersey. By the time of the English takeover, 1 out of every 8 white New Netherland residents owned slaves. During 1664, the British seized New Netherland from the Dutch. Proprietors purchased land from Lord John Berkeley and from the estate of Sir George Carteret. The colonies of East and West Jersey are formed, with the government under the control of the proprietors. Under the proprietary regime, black enslavement is encouraged. The concessions and agreement law offer additional acres of land for each slave imported. Such inducements spawn a rapid increase in the slave labor force, and by 1680, slavery is well established in East Jersey. For decades, the British slave trade is controlled by the Royal African Company. However, in 1689, the British government opens up the slave trade to all English merchants, which dramatically increases the number of ships that can now carry enslaved people. During 1702, the proprietors surrender control of East and West Jersey to the Royal Crown, that is, Queen Anne of England. Queen Anne urges Royal Governor Lord Cornbury to promote the importation of slaves. The triangle trade is born. Molasses from the Caribbean is shipped to New England. The molasses is fermented into rum. Both the rum, along with some of the monetary profits, are loaded in New England ships bound for Africa, where black slaves are purchased. The slaves are packed into the New England ships, transported across the Atlantic Ocean, and sold in the Caribbean. This process is continuous: molasses to rum to slaves.
No English flags on those ships. Just British government.
Situated at the junction of the Arthur Kill and Raritan River is the city of Perth Amboy. This colonial capital is easily accessible via the Atlantic Ocean to the Raritan Bay. From the islands of Barbados and Montserrat, the first black slaves are imported into this colonial capital city. And as the center of government, commerce, and shipping, Perth Amboy becomes a slave port. The 18th century city dock is located on the site of the present-day ferry slip. Here, enslaved Africans disembark slave ships. The larger ships dock in the Raritan Bay and send longboats to bring their human cargo to the city dock. The slaves are forced up Smith Street to the corner of Water Street. Barracks have been built near this intersection in order to accommodate the slave trade. The colonies of New York and Pennsylvania collect tariffs on Africans imported for slavery. However, for a period of 48 years, the New Jersey colony does not charge. Between 1721 and 1769, New Jersey allows duty-free importation of enslaved people. In order to maximize profits, slave ships select Perth Amboy as a port of entry, while New York City and Philadelphia are bypassed. From 1726 to 1790, New Jersey's black population grows 500%. And this involuntary workforce makes a vital contribution to the colony's economic development. The date is July 5th, 1750, and the location is Perth Amboy, New Jersey. Mr. and Mrs. Obadiah Ayres are tavern owners, known for their fine fare and accommodations. They are also slave owners. Tavern slaves do much of the physical labor as well as serve patrons. Mrs. Ayres scolds one of her male slaves over some trifle. After this, Mrs. Ayres sits down near the window. A round rifle ball blasts through the glass, promptly killing Mrs. Ayres. The man holding the rifle is the same man Mrs. Ayres recently reprimanded. Realizing that his punishment will be death, the murderer devises a scheme. He knows that a newly imported young slave wishes to run away, so he gives the rifle to this boy, telling him to run into the woods and shoot at anyone that he encounters. His thought is that the boy will be blamed for the murder of Mrs. Ayres. And, of course, with some urging, the young man takes the gun and races away. Colonial flintlock guns have a tendency to misfire, and that's exactly what happens. The young slave is captured and confesses what he knows. The murderer is apprehended, with both slaves being placed in jail. A trial is held in Perth Amboy City Hall, then known as the courthouse. A very special sentence of death is pronounced. Although the young man has no hand in Mrs. Ayres' murder, he is given the exact same verdict as the killer. Unfair according to modern-day standards. However, harsh judgments for slave offenses are commonplace during colonial days. Before the sentence is carried out,
see the
it is
church?
tradition that the condemned be taken to St.
Y'all
Peter's
see the church right
where they can
there?
pray and make their peace with God. From there, the two slaves are taken to a ravine on the north side of Perth Amboy, the area past present-day Washington Street, known in colonial days as Negro Gully. All of Perth Amboy's slaves are summoned from their homes and made to gather around in a circle with the two prisoners in the middle. Both condemned slaves are tied to large stakes anchored deep in the subsoil. Firewood is placed around them, and torches start the execution. Both men are burnt alive, with the slave population witnessing it all. Almost every home in colonial Perth Amboy has slaves. Even the respected Johnston clan owned enslaved people. Catherine Van Cortlandt Johnston runs the family household. Her spouse, Andrew Johnston, is the Speaker of the New Jersey Assembly, Mayor of Perth Amboy, Treasurer of the Colony, and most importantly, President of the East Jersey Board of Proprietors. While Andrew and Catherine are well liked, their relative, John Johnston, is commonly acknowledged at the time as one of the best men in the colony. In an earlier era, John Johnston holds many titles, including a court judgeship. As a judge, Johnston sentences murderers to death. For most, it is a typical hanging. But here, a slave named Caesar receives a much more unusual sentence, perhaps as a warning to other slaves.
Caesar, thou art found guilty by the country of those horrid crimes that are laid to thy charge. Therefore the court doth judge that thou, the said Caesar, shall return to the place from whence thou camest, and from thence to the place of execution, when thy right hand shall be cut off and burned before thine eyes. Then thou shalt be hanged up by the neck till thou art dead, dead, dead. Then thy body shall be cut down and burned to ashes in a fire. And so the Lord have mercy on thy soul, Caesar. John Johnston, Presiding Justice of the Monmouth Court of Sessions, September 23rd, 1694.
While deplorable, owning slaves is an accepted way of life in the British colonies. During the mid-18th century, it is not thought of as odd or unusual. Here, another well-respected New Jersey colonist posted an advertisement in a colonial newspaper.
£5 reward. Run away from the subscriber sometime in October 1762, a mulatto woman named Violet, about 30 years of age, of middle stature, was born at Princeton in the province of New Jersey, very active and pretends to be a free woman. She has since been seen in company with one James Locke, somewhere upon the Susquehanna, and by information was afterward, in the year 1764, taken up and committed to the jail of Frederickstown in Maryland on suspicion of her being runaway, from whence she is said to have made her escape. She then acknowledged that she had belonged to the subscriber, but being imposed upon by being sold a slave for life, runaway, which is only an invention of hers, for she was born a slave. Philip Carney, Perth Amboy, New Jersey, March 16, 1766.
Providing a military presence since 1758, the Perth Amboy British Barracks contains a regiment of English troops. Various regiments are stationed within the barracks, even during peacetime. British grenadiers are seen across this colonial capital city as they parade down High Street and conduct training maneuvers from the barracks to Sandy Point on the Raritan River. There will be no slave uprisings in the shadow of this army. Many of the founding fathers owned slaves. This enslaved servant may be William Lee. Lee is General George Washington's personal valet throughout the American Revolution. Following Washington into battle is a required task for Lee, as Lee is entrusted with Washington's telescope, along with the general's secret military correspondence. During the heat of battle, Lee is no more than an arm's length away from Washington. Upon Washington's death, he frees William Lee and requires that Martha Washington frees remaining slaves upon her demise. Martha frees over 120 slaves within her lifetime. Over 5,000 black men served in Washington's army during the American Revolution. In 1775, Virginia Governor Lord Dunmore offers freedom to any slave willing to serve in the British Army. Enslaved blacks fought on both sides during the war, with the majority of free blacks supporting American patriots.
That was the trick.
Royal Governor Lewis Morris is one of the largest slave owners in the province, and the gentry of that day and time are no different. Wealthy businessman Aaron Schuyler acquires 200 black slaves to work his mines. While digging deep into the bedrock, flooding occurs, entombing enslaved miners. Proprietor David Lyle has both enslaved blacks and enslaved Native Americans working his 300-acre plantation in Middletown, New Jersey. Lyle also maintains the Perth Amboy residence and may have been the silversmith for the Perth Amboy city seal. The architect for the proprietary house is John Edward Pryor. According to Pryor's account book, he borrows slaves in building the proprietary house. Enslaved workers provide the hard labor, such as digging foundations, leveling grounds, setting cut stones, and hauling bricks. Royal Governor William Franklin has enslaved servants. William's personal valet is a black slave. And even Benjamin Franklin owned slaves. George, Jemima, and King are Benjamin's enslaved servants. Later in life, Benjamin becomes an abolitionist, and the abolishment of slavery is something most New Jersey colonists do not want to consider. During 1774, 81 angry Perth Amboy residents warned Governor William Franklin about the dismal consequences of abolition, including the possibility of a slave revolt if New Jersey's black population is not controlled. In part, the colonial capital of New Jersey is built by enslaved people. Many of the gentry term slavery as a peculiar institution. Not all Perth Amboy's gentry are pro-slavery. Thomas Bartow, sometimes called the Old Hermit, is the Surveyor General for the East Jersey Proprietors and resides at the southwest corner of High and Market Streets. Bartow believes that blacks and Native Americans should not be enslaved.
Okay.
Bartow is also the teacher of a young William Dunlap. Dunlap will be among the first Perth Amboy slave owners to free his enslaved servants, setting a respected example for many more people to follow. Perth Amboy's William Dunlap is born in 1766. Dunlap will become a gifted artist, an art historian, and a playwright. The father of the American drama is the title given to Dunlap. Dunlap will also become an abolitionist. On February 15th, 1804, the New Jersey legislature enacts a law entitled An Act for the Gradual Abolition of Slavery.
That every child born of a slave within this state, after the 4th day of July next, shall be free, but shall remain the servant of the owner of his or her mother, in the same manner as if such child had been bound to service, and shall continue in such service if a male until the age of 25 years, and if a female until the age of 21 years. Council and General Assembly, Trenton, New Jersey, 1804.
Therefore, New Jersey is technically no longer a slave state, but slaveholding remains. Like other northern states, New Jersey replaces slavery with involuntary servitude for a fixed number of years. This same law allows slave owners to free children in bondage by surrendering them to the county poorhouse. In turn, the county poorhouse returns these children to the same slaveholder.
That the person entitled to the service of any child may abandon such right, and such child shall be maintained at the expense of the state at a rate of $3 per month.
So many slaveholders opt for this subsidy that by 1809, 40% of the New Jersey state budget is consumed with paying it. In essence, New Jersey taxpayers pay slaveholders to keep their slaves. To make matters even worse, slaveholders have the option to sell their slaves to the Deep South, and a new 1818 law forbids this practice. After the American Revolution, the proprietary house serves as a personal home. Later owners of this mansion include John Rattoon and Matthias Brune. Both Brune and Rattoon are also slave owners. In his last will and testament, John Rattoon set forth conditions for freeing his slaves. During 1810, Matthias Brune owns at least 3 slaves, but by 1830, Brune has only 1. In the early 19th century, many dinners, balls, and parties are held within the proprietary house. Matthias Brune is one of the wealthiest men in New Jersey. Dinner meetings are commonplace, with many New York City businessmen enjoying the splendor of this grand mansion. At one time, the Andrew Bell homestead existed just south of the proprietary house. Like the Rattoons and Bruins, slaves also work this mansion. Daphne, an enslaved woman, is a servant here. Later, she will be set free with an inheritance and leave the Bell mansion to start a life of her own. Local handyman Thomas Mundy Peterson marries Daphne, and they will purchase their own home in Perth, Amboy.
A so-called black man.
During 1818, Perth Amboy resident Lewis Compton, along with South River resident Jacob Van Winkle, make a devious scheme. To understand their plan, we need to know that the state of New Jersey had passed a law allowing the gradual abolition of slavery. That means the price of slaves in New Jersey decreased in value, as the institution of slavery was being dismantled in the Garden State. Compton and Van Winkle see a chance to make money. In the southern states, slave prices remain high. They can sell New Jersey slaves to the Deep South and make a large profit. A New Jersey slave can be purchased for $300, and that same slave can be sold in Louisiana for $800. One roadblock to this scheme is a New Jersey law requiring a slave's consent to leave the Garden State. But legal consent is determined by court judges. However, for Middlesex County Judge Jacob Van Winkle, that is not a problem. Slaves are deceived and coerced by Compton and Van Winkle. Judge Van Winkle even certifies children as young as 6 weeks old as consenting to leave New Jersey. The crying of a slave infant is deemed an answer of approval by Van Winkle. 2 ships are hired by Compton to transport slaves to Louisiana. Near Perth Amboy, the vessels the Mary Ann and the Thorn are loaded with 75 enslaved persons. Due to citizen complaints, the Mary Ann bypasses Perth Amboy officials and sails out of New York Harbor. The Perth Amboy-based Thorn meets up with the Mary Ann off the coast of Sandy Hook and transfers 36 enslaved people onto the Mary Ann. Several slaves are forced on board. At least 1 man is tied up and dragged below deck. By this time, the deception of consent has been revealed to all. The Thorn returns to Perth Amboy and loads yet another cargo of slaves on board, setting off for New Orleans. Authorities eventually catch up with the Mary Ann as the slave cargo is illegal. Yet, despite admissions of wrongdoing by those involved, no one is found guilty. And the people, who would have been freed via New Jersey law, now live out the rest of their lives in Southern bondage, enslaved for life.
Freedom.
Perth Amboy is located on a bluff, arising out of the junction of the Arthur Kill and Raritan River, which forms the Raritan Bay. These natural resources serve Perth Amboy well, providing fine oysters from the bay, along with a high-quality clay in the subsoil. During the 19th century, the harvesting of oysters and the making of bricks become the leading industries. Here on Water Street, the Parker Castle remains a witness to the many changes going on within Perth Amboy. The stone section of the Parker Castle was constructed during the 1720s, with the frame front being added before the American Revolution. Throughout the 1850s, the steamer Thomas Hunt brings in new residents with progressive ideas to this old city. One of those ideas is the freedom of slaves, with the means to do so via the Underground Railroad. Shrouded in legend and myth, the Underground Railroad is subject to more fabrication than any other slavery topic. First, the Underground Railroad is not underground, although some tunnels are used. It is not a railroad, even though some trains transport enslaved people. The Underground Railroad is a network used to guide runaway slaves to freedom, and Perth Amboy becomes part of that network. Marcus Spring is one of the founders of the Raritan Bay Union, located near the western border of Perth Amboy. A large 254-foot-long building called a phalanx is constructed on the bluff above the Raritan River. Within this phalanx is the Eagleswood School, along with apartments and service rooms for residents. Golden eagles nest here every year, which is where the name comes from. Eagleswood becomes a major station of the Underground Railroad. At this time, there is a national law named the Fugitive Slave Act. This 1850 act requires that runaway slaves be returned to their masters. There are monetary penalties, along with jail time for those aiding runaways. Both free and slave states are subject to the Fugitive Slave Act. During 1857, yet another blow to the anti-slavery movement occurs. It is one of the worst United States Supreme Court rulings of all time, the Dred Scott decision. Under this legal case, the Supreme Court rules that Scott is descended from slaves, thus not a United States citizen, and therefore cannot bring a lawsuit in a court of law. And the Supreme Court also decides that any ban on slavery is against the law because it violates property rights. Sadly, during 1857, slaves are considered property. Rational people, meaning those with more common sense, know that slaves are not property. They are only people being treated as property. Many believe that slavery should be abolished, so these abolitionists, utilizing the Underground Railroad, stand up for human rights and defy United States law, as well as the Supreme Court decision. Since they are operating in direct opposition to the law of the land, the Underground Railroad must operate in secrecy, with almost no records being kept.
Human beings may be inconsistent, but human nature is true to herself. She has uttered her testimony against slavery with a shriek ever since the monster was begotten. Until it perishes amidst the execrations of the universe, she will traverse the world on its track, dealing her bolts upon its head and dashing against it her condemning brand. Theodore Weld, 1839.
Weld is one of the leaders of the anti-slavery movement. Among Weld's peers is a young Frederick Douglass. Born into slavery on the eastern shore of Maryland, Douglass goes on to become a national leader of the abolition movement and one of the greatest orators of his day.
First register of deeds, property.
This daguerreotype is a rare glimpse of a historic call to end slavery. It is taken at an 1850 rally opposing the Fugitive Slave Act. Within this primitive image are anti-slavery leaders: Gerrit Smith, Frederick Douglass, Theodore Weld, and Angelina Grimke. And this growing movement will soon take Weld and Grimke to a small town in New Jersey, a former slave port named Perth Amboy. In 1854, Theodore Weld, along with his wife Angelina Grimke, step onto a Raritan River wharf in western Perth Amboy. The place is called Eagleswood. Weld is hired by Eagleswood co-founder Marcus Spring to start a progressive school. A school that would treat both sexes and all races equally. This idea is appealing to both Weld and Grimke, and the concept is beyond exceptional for this day and time. Blacks and whites will be schooled together in the same classroom without any discrimination. Angelina invites her sister, Sarah Grimke, to become an Eagleswood teacher. By the mid-19th century, both Angelina and Sarah have developed a reputation as abolitionists and also as feminists. And beyond that, the Grimke sisters and Theodore Weld are secret agents of the Underground Railroad. Thus, by the end of 1854, the Underground Railroad becomes firmly established on the banks of the Raritan River in Old Perth Amboy.
The Underground Railroad station at Eagleswood was becoming an important hiding place. Rebecca Spring often supervised the care given runaways who sought shelter at Massa Springs, where they had been directed. Hideaways were honeycombed in cave-like spots in the oak groves. Beatrice Beauchart, granddaughter of Marcus and Rebecca Spring.
At Eagleswood, the Raritan River provides an excellent means to transport slaves. Runaways are brought up the steep bluff towards the phalanx. Here, the refugees are given safe haven. Wounds from their trek are treated. However, Eagleswood is not the end of the journey. Due to the Fugitive Slave Act, runaways need to be transported north to Canada. Bounty hunters comb the New Jersey countryside for runaway slaves, and any place in the United States remains unsafe. There are many places to hide runaways at Eagleswood. At a length of 254 feet, the phalanx provides many rooms and passageways. And the phalanx is not the only place. as there are 30 other structures at Eagleswood, the art studio being one of these. Photographer Matthew Brady took this rare image of the phalanx. This image is the only known photograph of Eagleswood during its heyday. In the foreground, an orchard and vineyard is evident. Directly in back of the phalanx is the Raritan River.
Yeah.
Slaves, those involved in the Underground Railroad, are not only making an effective protest against slavery, but they are also doing something far more tangible. They're helping the oppressed. Taking chances, along with defying unjust laws, are a daily activity for all involved. The year is 1855, and the place is the Camden Amboy Railroad ferry terminal in Philadelphia. An enslaved woman, along with her 2 children, are requesting freedom. Standing nearby is their slave master, who argues that they are his property. Unknown to the slaveholders that this place is a main route of the Underground Railroad. Conductors of the Underground Railroad are on the scene. They immediately come between the slave master and the woman, making a physical barrier. All 3 slaves, the woman and the 2 children, are escorted out of the Camden Amboy ferry terminal to freedom. Guides of the Underground Railroad are sometimes called conductors. One of the most famous guides is Harriet Tubman, herself a former slave. Many of Tubman's travelers will go through Philadelphia. William Still is a conductor in Philadelphia. The city of brotherly love lives up to its name, being a main hub of the Underground Railroad. William Still will arrange safe transport across the Delaware River to the New Jersey side. On the Jersey side, other conductors, such as William's brother, Dr. James Still, or Thomas Oliver, will take over the journey. Here is a rare 19th century map showing routes of the Underground Railroad. From Camden, the runaways are transported to New Brunswick. Just east of New Brunswick, conductors are commonly met with opposition in attempts to cross the Raritan River. Slave catchers, bounty hunters, and spies linger around this crossing. In order to avoid them, the road to Perth Amboy is used, and the Raritan River is also employed, as will take the refugees downstream, directly to the Eagleswood dock in Perth Amboy. From Perth Amboy, stagecoaches, wagons, boats, and railroads are highly accessible for the northbound journey to Canada. In Perth Amboy, the sick and lame will be cared for and made fit for the trek. And so, the historic town of Perth Amboy works to redeem itself. This former slave port has now become a route to freedom. At 268 acres, Eagleswood comprises most of Perth Amboy's western border. Here, an old trail leads up to the Eagleswood Cemetery. Throughout the mid-19th century, philosophers, artists, authors, and runaway slaves used this route. This is a familiar scene to such people as Henry David Thoreau, Ralph Waldo Emerson, Louis Comfort Tiffany, and George Inness. One very special grave at the Eagleswood Cemetery is that of Arnold Buffum, founder of the New England Anti-Slavery Society.
My father, Arnold Buffum, passed the last years of his life at Eagleswood. Mobbed and stoned in America for being a friend of the black man, Arnold Buffum was the first president of the first Anti-Slavery Society, for which he suffered persecution. In America at that time, it was a disgrace to be an emancipationist. We, his children, were born to and live in that work, and we never rested from it, though we often had to pass through deep waters. Rebecca Buffum Spring, Eagleswood co-founder.
In 1859, at a mountain hideout, John Brown organizes a small army. Brown is under the firm belief that only a violent insurrection will overthrow the institution of slavery. On the evening of October 16th, Brown crosses the Potomac River, leading 18 men into Harper's Ferry, Virginia. Brown and his small force descend into this town, seize the federal armory, free slaves, and vow to liberate every enslaved person in the South. Brown has high hopes that the local slave population will join him. This is not to be. A militia unit counterattacks Brown. Armed citizens outflank Brown. Brown, along with some of his men, take refuge in the armory's engine house and make it their fort. The firestorm from rifles and sidearms continues. One of Brown's lieutenants, Aaron Stevens, goes out under a flag of truce to negotiate a peace. Stevens is shot by a Harper's Ferry saloon keeper. Riddled by 6 bullets, Stevens collapses to the ground. Of the 18 men Brown led into Harper's Ferry, half are now dead, dying, or captured. United States Marines arrive at Harper's Ferry. They continue the attack, wounding and killing more of Brown's men. After 2 days of fighting, Brown refuses to surrender. The Marines charge the engine house. Brown is taken prisoner along with other survivors. Newspapers across the country cover Brown's saga. Reporters flock to Brown's jail and courtroom trial in Charlestown, Virginia.
Startling news came to us one morning in October 1859 that men attempting to free the slaves at Harper's Ferry in Virginia were wounded and cast into prison. I said I must go help them. Mr. Spring entreated me not to think of it. He said the way was full of dangers and I could never get there. I answered, "We have talked against slavery all these years. Now somebody has done something. These men have risked their lives. I must go." Rebecca Buffum Spring, Eagleswood, Perth Amboy, New Jersey.
Rebecca travels with her son Edward to the Charlestown, Virginia jail, where John Brown and his lieutenant Aaron Stevens are held. Only by an order from a court of law do Rebecca and Edward gain access to Brown and Stevens. Both men are still bleeding from their wounds. Edward draws this rare image of Brown's prison room. In addition, Edward also draws a detailed plan of the Charlestown jail, showing windows and doorways. Some historians speculate that Edward may have been asked to do this by those planning to break Brown out of jail. There is no other explanation for such precise layouts. However, Brown is resolving to be executed as a martyr.
Now, if it is deemed necessary that I should forfeit my life for the furtherance of the ends of justice, and mingle my blood further with the blood of my children and the blood of millions in this slave country, whose rights are disregarded by the wicked, cruel, and unjust enactments, I submit. So let it be done. John Brown, Charleston Jail, 1859.
Rebecca Spring befriends 2 of Brown's imprisoned men, Aaron Stevens, and Absalom Hazlitt.
Hazlitt was only 22 years old, but showed wonderful courage and trust. When all hope of mercy was over, he wrote to ask me to have him buried with Mr. Stevens in a free land. Rebecca Buffum Spring.
Rebecca and Edward Spring return to Perth Amboy. En route, they visit Mary Brown, John Brown's wife. Along with Mary's 2 daughters, they all travel to Eagleswood. The Brown family resides in the Spring homestead near the Raritan River. On December 2nd, 1859, John Brown is executed on charges of treason, murder, and insurrection. 3 months later, both Stevens and Hazlitt are also paraded to the gallows. Marcus and Rebecca Spring have the bodies of Stevens and Hazlitt transported to Perth Amboy. One man offers $50 to have their coffins thrown into the Raritan River. Despite this threat, a memorial service takes place.
There was a great gathering at the funeral. The parlor, the hall, and the piazzas were all full of people. The hymns, the sermon, the words of several gentlemen, also what I said, were all listened to with respectful attention. And when I showed them a noble picture taken in prison of the young man Stevens, all hearts were touched, and I thought I saw tears in the eyes of even the man who had offered $50 to have their bodies thrown in the water. A long procession followed them to the final resting place under the trees in the beautiful cemetery at Eagleswood. Rebecca Buffum Spring, Perth Amboy, 1860.
At this cemetery, Stevens and Hazlitt are buried near the graves of runaway slaves and other deceased members of Eagleswood. With numerous pathways and hiding places along 268 acres of land, Eagleswood will continue to be a major station of the Underground Railroad. Perhaps this being the greatest tribute to both free and enslaved people laid to rest within the Eagleswood Cemetery. The year 1861 brings change to Eagleswood. For the past 7 years, the Phalanx was a progressive educational institution, as well as an important station of the Underground Railroad. The outbreak of the American Civil War changes all that. Runaway slaves can now proceed directly to the Union Army. The Army takes in these runaways, calling them contrabands of war. This effectively ends the need for the secret Underground Railroad network. By mid-1861, Theodore Weld, along with the Grimke sisters, decide to leave Eagleswood. Weld returns to the lecture platform to speak on the plight of enslaved people. Marcus and Rebecca Spring agree with Weld. In order to serve the needs of the Union, the Springs convert the school into a military academy.
The real object of military discipline in the academy is not to make soldiers only of the students, but to give them the strength of body, vigor of constitution, and manliness of bearing, to fit them not merely for the field of battle, but all employments and departments of life. Marcus Spring, Perth Amboy, 1861.
In many Civil War battles, soldiers advance in large, tight formations towards well-fortified enemy positions. The military theory is that while advancing in tight ranks, the soldiers can deliver overwhelming concentrated firepower. These assaults result in a high casualty rate as the soldiers are exposed due to the tactics being employed. Over 600,000 soldiers die in the American Civil War. During September of 1862, President Abraham Lincoln announces the Emancipation Proclamation. Effective on the first day of 1863, this proclamation frees enslaved people in the rebellious Confederate States. Lincoln turns the Civil War into a moral cause.
I am well satisfied if I can do anything to help carry out what I think is the greatest work of the moment, raising colored troops. The Emancipation Proclamation can only be made irrevocable by the bravery and blood of this downtrodden race. James McKay, Eagleswood resident and lieutenant, 4th Regiment, United States Colored Troops, 1863.
By 1865, the Civil War is winding down. Abraham Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation is only an executive order via wartime powers of the president. This emancipation order does not have the weight of law behind it. Therefore, the Emancipation Proclamation does not ensure the end of slavery. Lincoln presses the House of Representatives to pass a new amendment to the United States Constitution. Already passed in the Senate, the proposed 13th Amendment will free all slaves. On January 31st, 1865, the House of Representatives passes the 13th Amendment, and within the same year it is ratified. Slavery is now outlawed. Nearly 4 million enslaved people become free. Five days after General Robert E. Lee's Appomattox surrender, President Lincoln attends a play with his wife Mary, Major Henry Rathbone, and Rathbone's fiancée Clara Harris. With a single-shot .44 caliber pocket Derringer, John Wilkes Booth fires into the president. 9 hours later, Lincoln dies. The nation mourns the death of President Lincoln. The newfound freedom for black men and women will not be accepted by all Americans. Unfortunately, it will be met with intimidation, violence, and discrimination in many towns throughout the United States. On March 31st, 1870, a Perth Amboy election is held with the voting polls at City Hall. At question is the ratification of a revised city charter. However, what actually happens that day sets a national precedent.
I was working for Mr. J.L. Carney on the morning of the day and did not think of voting till he came out of the stable where I was attending to the horses and advised me to go to the polls and exercise a citizen's privilege. When I went home to dinner at noon, I met Mr. Marcus Spring of Eagleswood, a place about a mile off town, and he too advised me to claim the right of suffrage at the polls. As I advanced to the polls, one man offered me a ticket bearing the words Revised Charter, and another one marked No Charter. I thought I would not vote to give up our charter after holding it so long, so I chose a Revised Charter ballot. Thomas Mundy Peterson, Perth Amboy, 1870.
Just the day before this historic vote takes place, the 15th Amendment was adopted, becoming part of the United States Constitution. This amendment allows black men to vote. Thomas Mundy Peterson is the first black man to vote under this new law, with the second being Marcus Curlis, a coachman from Eagleswood. Peterson is requested to vote by Marcus Spring and James Lawrence Carney of the Carney Cottage. Carney is descended from Perth Amboy slaveholders. However, Carney is also an Eagleswood Academy alumni. He believes in racial equality. Thomas Mundy Peterson resides towards the back of the old Hugh Ramsey mansion at the corner of High and Commerce Streets on a small alleyway named Commerce Lane. In the background of this old photograph of Ramsey's residence may be the only known image of the Thomas Mundy Peterson homestead. Vertical clapboards accent what appears to be a front gable, board and batten clad house. Throughout the 19th century, and even up to the present day, minorities are discouraged from voting. In some parts of the United States, roadblocks are put in place in order to disenfranchise these voters. Perth Amboy is different. While many places are trying to stop Black Americans from voting, the citizens of Perth Amboy encourage the right to vote. Freedom is not free. American history serves as good evidence that freedom for all is a continuous struggle from one generation to the next. Issues with American slavery span 3 centuries, starting with a few colonial visionaries, expanding to an organized underground network, and eventually ending in a massive civil war. American slavery finally ceases to exist. Historic Perth Amboy's role in the slave trade is notorious, but over time the mindset changes in Perth Amboy. Citizens stand up for an ideal to improve the lot of the enslaved, strike out against the injustice of slavery, and in part set the trend for what America is about to become. With a firm belief that our country was founded on the principle that all men are created equal, the good people of Perth Amboy transformed their hometown from a port of slavery into a port of freedom.
That's it, Archbishop. So as you can see from the history of Perth Amboy, is our door to slavery and is our door to freedom. And understand that is by going back to the body of politics that existed before the profiteers who got their grant from the minority corporation soul. So the video is very informative. It gives a better understanding in lieu of our research when you come at it from our English Temple Church perspective, because it clears up the abstract and brings to concrete. So that's the end of the lesson. I hope you all enjoyed it, and I let each and everyone give your final dissertation on that. And with that, I digress. Queen?
Very informative lesson on Perth Amboy. Like I said, just to learn your history and study, because that's going to be the key to what we need to do to regain our lost estate. And with that, I digress.
Well said, Queen. Well said, Queen. Archbishop?
Once again, brothers and sisters, as we can see, New Jersey is the pretty much is the point of interest that we need to be tracking ourselves regarding the history. Like the King said, it was the origin of slavery, and then as well as we see where our freedom dwells. And as we've seen via 16:1-28, saving the rights granted in Great Britain, these proprietors themselves, were given their charters from the King of Great Britain, and those charters were relinquished and given back to the King because of those proprietors You know, either they no longer had heirs or they no longer existed, or that the polity that they were actually running jurisdiction wise no longer was under their control once they relinquished it back to Great Britain. And as you see, our history, especially going back to the Underground Railroad, is tied to Perth Amboy. And many brothers and sisters, you know, we have always been told about the Underground Railroad from so-called starting from the south and ending up north. And then, you know, going up north was pretty much, they were trying to get to the northern colonies, i.e. England. So, you know, it just kind of to show you once again that our history is always intact, no matter where you go, as long as you utilize the proper eyes and pay attention to the details once presented to you. So once again, King and Queen, great job in bringing this lesson to us, especially bringing our understanding again to Perth Amboy regarding history and slavery, especially during the colonial time, which we're still underneath. So as you see, we are still occupied underneath the occupation, the slavery. It's still going on today in the so-called states that or in the territories we call states that are still colonies. So with that being said, I digress, and I leave the rest of the closing to the rest of the brothers and sisters.
Okay, well said, Archbishop. And just to camel back on what you just said, as I stated before we went into the lecture, that the history in regards to Native Americans, indigenous people of this particular landmass is fraudulent.
Like the Lenapis.
It's like the Lenape, all that is fraudulent, because it's mighty strange that the slave trade don't start to the 16th century, and it starts with the Middle Passage, which is in Perth Amboy. And then all the slaves that were here were transported to the southern colonies. And then once we abandoned slavery, the southern colonies didn't want to stop. And then they started to make their way back to the eastern seaboard. And as a result of those slave acts, they had to make their way to Canada. But we know Canada was fraudulent because of what Bennington Wentworth did with his land grants given up to what they call New England, because all those were going back to the charters given by Charles II to Duke of York, March 12, 1664. So well said, Archbishop. Brother Burgess from the House of Burgess.
Blessings, family.
Greetings.
Like the deeper I get into the history, the customs, and the traditions, I just see you just reveal so much to me, King, every time, man. It's really hard to put it in words sometimes. It's the conduct itself is going to show where I stand at within the body politics. So I'm definitely appreciative to be even at the table with y'all, with everybody here. And I'm gonna continue to do what I need to do as a trustee. I digress.
Well said, Noble. And like I said, I concur with that from what I see. Well said. Countess Walker from the House of Walker.
Greetings, greetings, greetings.
Greetings, Countess.
I love the lesson because it shows you can't have law without history, and you can't have history without law. And also the importance of Perth Amboy, which, you know, I know that's where the king and the queen resides. And, you know, it's very special because even in my family, my mother and my father's side, in history, they were in the same town. And so once again, you know, the king and the queen are in the same town where all this rich history, where slavery began and where it also started to come apart. Also, I see even in my family, even the younger people in my family are now becoming more interested in law, and they're starting to inquire with me about law. And so once again, history and law, it's going to always become a time in our family where people will have to learn law, because ignorance of the law is no excuse. So I'm happy to be here, and I'm also grateful for these lessons, and I'll continue to dive in. One thing that I got out of this lesson, which kind of stood out for me with all the notes that I took, was when Rebecca Buford's spring she wanted to have time with John Brown. She needed a court order, and surprisingly, she got a court order to visit with him. So I'm going to look into that further. But once again, I thought this was a great lesson, and I know we're not finished with this lesson. I'm sure the King's gonna bring us back to some more relevant information that's going to be relevant to us English heirs. So I digress.
Well said, and I'm glad you stated that, because the lessons are very important, because the question we have to ask ourselves is that why is the parties that supported the abolition of slavery are trying to assist in the abolition of slavery? Why? Why is that karma so bound on you to assist us in the slavery? Is that because you know something more than you're not telling us? That becomes the question we need to ask ourselves. So well said, Sister Walker. Countess Middleton from the House of Middleton.
Yes, King. This really hit close to home. In particular, I had no idea that Perth Amboy was so connected with the slave trade. I did know that they had what they call the patrollers or paddle rollers. And that was in my relationship in understanding the history of Sandy Ground, which is right across the water in Staten Island, in terms of it being known as the first free African-American settlement in New York State, from which my father's family comes from. So I was very familiar with Sandy Ground as a child, and it also being a step on the Underground Railroad. They had a lot of self-sufficiency going on. And ironically enough, my great-grandfather on the father's side was in the Civil War on the northern side. But on my mother's side, my great-great-grandfather fought on the Southern Confederate side. So it's just really interesting. And also the Grimke sisters came from Charleston, South Carolina. So a lot of things are really circulating, a lot of mixed feelings. And again, you know, the whole, what we call the indigenous, if it being fraudulent throws a whole nother wrench in everything. So this raises a lot of questions. This clarifies a lot of questions. A very intrigued, very interesting story. And I appreciate you, King. Thank you.
Well said, Sister Middleton. Countess
we have
Alice
CA.
from the House of Allen. What'd you say, Archbishop?
CA also was able to speak as well.
Who?
CA.
Okay, all right, CA, okay. Countess Allen from the House of Allen.
Greetings.
Greetings.
This was definitely a marvelous lesson today. You know, learning about Perth Amboy. It's the inception of slavery and the culmination of slavery. Very, very key, very intricate in the movement of how Perth Amboy developed during that time. It was so much rich history. I would not have even in my wildest dreams thought that they played such a huge, significant role in Underground Railroad, the education of slaves, the integration of the schools, you know, and John Brown, Sandy Hook, you know, I mean, so many things just come to mind when I'm watching the video, you know, and the disenfranchisement of slaves, the discouragement of voting that persisted in the southern states, whereas in Perth Amboy, it was encouraged, you know. That's very important, you know, because they were atoning for their karmic debt that they had played in starting all of this and and I think they did a very good job at, trying to replay history, retell the stories as truthfully as possible, and the key players that were involved also. And that was, again, a marvelous lesson today, King. Thank you, and I digress.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate you. Sister Countess Harris, greetings.
Greetings, everyone. I want to apologize. I did come into the call a little late. I was trying to listen while I was on my phone, so I got on my computer. I came in late. I would also agree with Countess Middleton and Countess Allen. I didn't realize Perth Amboy was so important to the history of the beginning of slavery, which is very interesting because I visit Perth Amboy when I used to live in Jersey, and I didn't understand the clues. I was given clues then, but I didn't realize what I was trying to what I was being shown. And also, I came in on the end, King, when you were speaking about the rectors, the rector. Well, it's a coincidence. It's not a coincidence I'm here, but my father's name is Rector.
Wow.
So,
wow.
So I'll go into that. I'll go in detail on that on my dissertation, which I've been working on. So I thought that was interesting as well. But I will go back and listen to the video as well.
Thank you, Countess Harris from House of Harris. All right, we heard from our countesses. Let's hear from our earls and our men of stature. C.A. Murphy from the House of Murphy. I apologize, I missed you, officer.
Greetings, peace and love. Oh, what an honor! I'm so honored to listen in to the marvelous lesson. I had so many thoughts, and I've been struggling to keep them all, to try to make all the points that I wanted to make, but I'll just go through as my mind allows me. The thought of Anthony Johnson and the knowledge of his situation must have been prevalent to the New Jersey Assembly, as it were, to the slave trade. The guy who was there to make money, I forgot his name, but
what's his name? Van Winkle.
Van Winkle. So obviously he knew that he could make more by taking them to the South, and the South were governed, or were newly governed under New Spain and New France, which we know are Catholic and Protestants. So they would have indeed been belligerent as far as the laws were concerned. And it's the emancipation, or the so-called end of slavery, which basically means leaving one place to another. So they went from a different form of servant subjectivity to another. That's one point I wanted to make. The other one was in listening to the video, and it talks about the amount of slaves and where they were coming from, and the Indians and so on and so forth. Again, a lot of it is fictional in the sense that, England did it by right of discovery, Spain and them did it by right of conquest. So two different monarchies and two different methods of colonization, if you will. When Francis Drake came into the California territory, they looked at him as a long lost family member, and not so much by the sword. So being that England didn't have slavery, it would have been difficult during these times to implement until the time of James VI of Scotland and his land patents that he granted to York, to Carteret and Berkeley. So it definitely needs to be watched again. I'm going to watch it again so that I can make sure that I cover all my things, because all my points are all jumbled up. But it was definitely a marvelous lesson. My family, the Murphy family, were loyalists to the crown in the war. So after the war was over, they had some decisions to make as far as you want to be a part of the American new thing, or stay with the loyalist, like William Franklin. So yeah, it's definitely a beautiful thing to realize that the history and law go hand in hand, and that the knowledge of the history qualifies the powers granted, the rights, and the belligerent trustees in position as attorney generals, lawyers, and legislators of a new state, that which is de facto from its outside of its corporate charter. So I digress with that. Thank you for the marvelous lesson, King. Thank you, Queen. Thank you, Archbishop. Thank you, Esquire, panel, Third Temple. I love you all. At the sound of my voice, I trust all is well, and I yield with that.
Thank you, C.A. Murphy from the House of Murphy. Brother Gray from the House of Gray. Greetings, Noble.
Brother Gray can't speak. He had to work.
All right. We have Brother Harris from the House of Harris.
Greetings, King.
Greetings, Noble.
Family. Beautiful lesson. I can't wait to go back and warm up this lesson again so I can revisit it, because it was trying to write down the points and notes. And King, you did make a point, like, why were they so, eagerly to assist?
Finish your thought?
Oh, yes, I'm sorry, King. Yeah, so I just want to go back over those points. My wife was sitting there listening with me, and she was just smiling, like shaking her head, like, wow, we definitely got to replay this.
Yeah. There you go. Like I said, a lot can be said and can be missed without that proper understanding or interpreting what it is being said.
Right.
Because it fly right over our head. So
I think about being in school. It's like, okay, your family was born, boom. They woke up in slavery and ended that story.
Mm-hmm. Yes. I want to go back to sleep and go back to where I went to sleep. You know what I'm saying? Because that's what's missing. And that takes you back into self, self-evaluation, self-verification, verifying self. And that only comes from memory, daydreaming about self.
Right.
Dreaming about a state other than the state we're in. And that can't come from a fabrication. It has to come from how you got here, and how you got here has been displayed today. So well said, brother. Brother Militant from the House of Militant, you will be our last.
I digress. Thank you.
Voice. Thank you, sir. Brother Militant. Is there, brother? Okay, well, in your absence, we love you, Noble, and I hope the lesson was all that was needed to be. And with that, Archbishop, you got the floor.
Once again, brothers and sisters from the Kingdom of England, Empire of Albion, thank you for coming to service today. Like the King says, please watch these videos over, study, show yourself approved, because no one can actually be in your body and give you this information. You have to be the one that's willing to absorb it, study it on your downtime to make it applicable for your everyday life. We didn't come for everyone. Once again, the message is for those lost English heirs and so-called subjects of Great Britain who have realized that this is their walk and the way that they should be finding themselves. And if you haven't found yourself this way, then the message is not for you. So with that being said, we love you. Please donate to the channel, to the church, so therefore we can continue to keep doing this great work, keep this information coming to your dial plate. So therefore, like you said, you can actually find yourself ushered back into the church, which we call the visible church here, for the salvation for our lost English heirs and subjects of Great Britain. So with that being said, peace.
Peace. Anglo spirit, not Euro spirit, y'all. Anglo spirit, not Euro spirit. Peace and love. Talk to you later.
Peace and love.